Uh-oh, okay, hold on. Yeah, hold on. Okay. Okay, this is, not yet. Hold on. You see that right there? That is Puerto Rico. United States, Mexico. Where else, babe? What's that?
Cuba,
Cuba,
Haiti,
Haiti,
Dominican Republic, same island.
Dominican Republic.
Jamaica down below Cuba.
They're right close to, right next door to Dominican Republic.
And Haiti, same island.
Okay, perfect.
There's Jamaica right underneath Cuba down.
Right here?
No, down,
Oh,
down,
here.
down, 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 down,
Here.
right there. Ooh.
Okay, this is Jamaica right there.
Mhm.
Okay. Puerto Rico used to be a Spanish colony that ended up as an unincorporated US territory. Today, people born in the island are US citizens that have self-government, but they have no say in anything that happens in the mainland unless they live there. It's really sad, you know. I mean, it's like they're a territory, they're kind of America, part of the United States, but you know, and I read in an article somewhere that there's 3 million, I guess it was, yeah, almost 3 million population in Puerto Rico. And we know that they would all be Democrats. So if they made Puerto Rico a state, the Republicans would never win. So that's one of the reasons why Puerto Rico, you know, isn't a state. Anyway, it has a population of just under 3 million. The main island is the smallest and most eastern of the Great Antilles, with an area of 3,500 square miles. It's also the third largest island in the United States. That's interesting. And the 82nd largest island in the world. Okay, and this is San Juan is the capital right there. Let me try. San Juan right there, capital of Puerto Rico.
Which means St. John.
Which what?
Means Saint.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
That's right. Oh,
That's wonderful.
thanks, Francisco.
Yeah.
I'll be your translator today.
Okay,
Okay.
please do.
Help us,
Please help
please.
us along and please give some inputs in anything that you might be able to add. Puerto Rico's first inhabitants were the Tainos, a group of indigenous people. Here we go. Here's the Tainos. A group of indigenous people who lived on the island for hundreds of years before the Spanish arrived. The arrival of the Spaniards in 1493 marked the beginning of the Tainos extinction.
Ooh.
Already at war with the Caribs, another indigenous group migrating to the Antilles, the Tainos began to lose territory, and under Spanish ruling, the original Boricus, whatever, ceased to exist. So this is it always happens with indigenous people when the Western world comes.
Boricos.
Yeah.
The word Boricos.
Boricus.
Yeah.
Christopher Columbus arrived, and here. Christopher Columbus arrived in Puerto Rico in 1493 during his second voyage to the New World. Initially, Columbus christened the island as San Juan Baptista, St. John the Baptist. Still, the name was soon changed to Puerto Rico, or Rich Port, when the Spaniards realized the impressive amount of gold found in its rivers. When the capital city was established, it took the name of San Juan. Under Spanish governance, the island developed an even more sophisticated agricultural system than what the Tainos had founded. Sugarcane, coffee, tobacco were among the island's major exports. Due to the increasing demand for products, all the decreasing number of local inhabitants to work the land, Spain brought African slaves to Puerto Rico. Wait, due to the increasing demand for products and the decreasing number of local inhabitants to work the land, Spain brought African slaves to Puerto Rico. Okay. Okay, in the late 1800s, the desire for independence from the Spanish crown over Puerto Rico, boiled over Puerto Rico. While the Spanish soldiers quickly suppressed the rebellion in San Juan, outbursts and uprisings erupted throughout the island, which led the Spanish crown to grant autonomy to the government on the island. This change opened trade channels with other European colonies and with the United States. Okay, this is also Ponce de Leon was the first governor of Puerto Rico. His grandson, Juan Ponce de Leon II, was the first indigenous governor of Puerto Rico. That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, did I read this already in the late 1800s?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. The autonomous government, you know, we've been talking about eyes, now my eyes are blurry. I don't know what's happening. I can't see almost. The autonomous government granted by Spain didn't last long. After the Spanish-American War ended in 1898, Puerto Rico and Guam were ceded to the United States as part of the terms of the Treaty of Paris, and Puerto Rico maintained its provincial status to this day. With Puerto Rico's colonial state came several changes, mainly in currency, government, and education, with civil rights and political status being decided by US Congress, a power it still holds more than a century later. So all the laws that we share in America, have in America, Puerto Rico shares those laws, yet they don't have the right to vote. I just think that's just, something's wrong with that.
Isn't it Trump that didn't help them?
Oh yeah, he was horrible.
Yeah.
He didn't help them when it's one of the worst hurricanes. And it's, even today, they still struggle, you know, trying to rebuild. During the first 3 decades of its rule over Puerto Rico, the US Congress approved a new Puerto Rican constitution that made the island an autonomous US Commonwealth, while the island retained full American citizenship. See, I don't, how can you
Be a
attain
citizen. Can't
full
vote.
American citizenship? You can't vote.
Yeah, that's wrong.
Something's wrong with that. Okay, so anyway, these are the lovely people of Puerto Rico, the children. And all,
So they use Puerto Rico for what? In because there must
I
be
think they use it for like their natural resources, you know, they have a lot of natural resources, and that's what these countries do. You know, that's what, unfortunately, these Western developed worlds do. They take advantage of these undeveloped worlds, and they kind of plunder their natural resources. It's really horrible, but I don't, it's
They
wrong.
also had,
You can keep an eye on
just gonna
Cuba
say-
from Puerto Rico. That's part of the reason.
What? Say that again?
You can keep an eye on Cuba,
Yeah, there, you're right. That's true.
which is was a Russian you know, affiliated with Russia for a long time.
Underneath Florida. That's Cuba.
That's Cuba, right?
Yeah.
It's so strange, Francisco. We got a close eye at Guantanamo Bay. Don't have much to say, but we got a close eye and we're stuck right on Cuba.
Yeah.
they have
figured that one
a
out yet.
place down there. If you look on that, go ahead. If you look on the on the map right there, that to the right,
Okay, yeah.
up on the top there, it says Isla de Culebra. Kathy and I spent like months down there sailing around.
Wow.
And that island right there, it has old stuff you can see now, even at least when we were down there. They had old tanks and stuff like that from World War II on that island. And they used to use that island for military like practice. They bomb it and all kinds of stuff like there. So I think part of that was it's just a strategic spot. And then, okay, so Puerto Rico can't vote, but if you look not on that map, but just to the right of that map is where the Virgin Islands are, and they're the same situation. They're all Americans right
Here?
there.
Where's the
but
Virgin
they,
Islands?
they don't vote or
Here.
anything.
That's the Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, right next door to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know
So
what?
they're all in the same boat.
Yeah, I know in Hawaii, there's all these little, because we have like 7 islands in Hawaii and or 8 islands, and one of the islands they use for military practice too. You can't, you can't even go on the island because it's just full of, what do you call those shells that didn't blow?
Exploded rounds.
Yeah, and so they're trying to clean it up, but I don't know.
Now, the eighth island on Hawaii, all the way to the far west, is privately owned by a contractor a couple hundred years ago.
Yeah, the Robinson
You have to get
family.
permission to even go on there. Yeah.
Okay.
Puerto Rico has put together a document, and I think it was this year of becoming voting towards statehood.
Yes.
And I don't know what happened, but it just dropped out of the news. I've never heard what happened to it.
Well, you know what? There's a big debate. Okay, there's a fight amongst the Puerto Rican people. There's a percentage of people that want to be part of the United States. There's another percentage of people who don't. They want autonomy. They want to have their own thing. So there's all these different people that want different things. So they're not united. But the thing is, here, this is what I think, because I'm from Hawaii. Well, there was no uniting when we became a state because, the islands were taken by force, and so there was nothing, not many people wanted to be a state, but it became one anyway. I guess because it was a strategic military position in the middle of the Pacific. And Hawaii had more allegiances with Britain than they did the United States. So United States had to get in there, otherwise Britain would have taken part in that.
I think they would have to go ahead and start paying taxes. I don't think they
Yeah, probably. Yeah, but I don't know, maybe becoming a state for Puerto Rico might help their economy because it is just so it's a lot of poverty,
Yeah.
So I don't know. The people have to decide for themselves, but there is a big debate about it. Some people like America and some people don't, in Puerto Rico. Yeah, you can read that.
Okay, folks, here I go. LGBT rights in Puerto Rico. LGBT persons in Puerto Rico have almost the same protection and rights as heterosexual individuals. Public opposition still exists due to the large part to the strong influence of the Roman Catholic Church, as well as socially conservative Protestants. Puerto Rico has a great influence on the legal rights of LGBT citizens. Same-sex marriage has been legal in the Commonwealth since July 2015, after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriage bans are unconstitutional. In 2002, Puerto Rico amended its hate crime statutes to include sexual orientation and gender identity as protected characteristics. 2020 was the first year everyone in Puerto Rico was charged with a hate crime. Sean Diaz de Leon and Juan Pagan Bonilla were charged under the hate crime law after Bonilla's confession, in which he stated he and Diaz de Leon murdered 2 transgender women on 22nd April 2020.
Okay, so we have this situation here where, there 2002, they made it a crime for a hate crime, and it protected the LGBT community. However, the first person charged with a hate crime was in 2020. So even though legally they have taken on the same rights as America has in giving rights to these LGBT people, the fact that the first hate crime person that was charged is in 2020 tells you that there's a disconnect here, because it's not only 2020 that you have hate crimes in LGBT. So that's just a little bit of a flag for me, anyway. Okay,
Yeah, until 2015, back to that date of 2015,
yeah,
when all this happened.
Well, you're gonna find out it's just like anywhere else. It's against the law here, but they still abuse them.
And look at who their opposition is, the Roman Catholic Church and the socially conservative Protestants.
yeah,
Conservative Protestants.
yeah, yeah. It's a, believe it or not, there is a strong conservative mindset in Puerto Rico. Okay, here we go. This is the other side of the picture when it comes to LGBT rights. Did you want to read that? Trans man killed amid Puerto Rico's wave of homophobic and transphobic violence. Samuel Edwards Damien, right here, is at least the 7th trans person killed in the Commonwealth in less than 1 year. Police fail to comply with their protocols and ignore, make invisible, and minimize the serious problems. A founder of the LGBT advocacy group. After the charred remains of 2 trans women were found inside a burned out car in Humacao last spring, the FBI stepped in to join the investigation. In April, the suspects, Juan Carlos Payan Bonilla, 21, and Sean Diaz de Leon, 19, became the first people in Puerto Rico to face federal hate crime charges. First person in Puerto Rico. Okay. In February, Luciano Ruiz, right here, this one, also known as Alexa, was shot to death in Toa Alta 1 day after being reported to the police for using woman's bathroom in a McDonald's. Ruiz's attacker reportedly posted video of the shooting on social media. Okay, that was this woman right here.
Yeah, I think about where does all this hate come from?
There's so much hate here. I'm serious. There's a big hate problem with these LGBT. It's
I'm
horrible.
just thinking about how does the hate come about? It comes about by, like what we're learning, that when those, like, take the Protestants, for instance, the conservative Protestants, they see a threat, right? It's projected out there to reach people's emotions, to cause them to fear something. And then you get people that actually act on their own because they, are we born with some of this hatred, or is it like something that comes from all our external influences that we're raised to see? Because then they go out and they act on this hatred.
I don't think we're born with it.
It's like, I can't think of the words to describe it, so maybe you have it, but no, not that we're not born with it, but it's taught.
Yes.
It's taught, I guess, or learned behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a traditional mindset that has been programmed to deal with, along with every other thing, racial and gender inequality is just a mindset that's been thought. But if they understood the Bible, what did Christ say? He who has no sin, go ahead and throw that first stone. They didn't understand that. From that point on, you ain't supposed to go stoning and beating up everybody if you disagree with what they do. But they never have understood or taught that mindset. God would deal with whoever, whatever in the end, but you don't have to go killing somebody because.
And there really is a wrong understanding of the Bible, because look at our own selves just coming out of, look at the last few years, how many times I was asked, so is homosexuality not a sin? All these thoughts, because look where we were at. It didn't mean we were ready to go kill somebody, but
No.
you know what I mean? But
yeah,
the hatred is something that seems to be in parts, and that seems to be like with Trump, for instance. Trump brought out or made it like okay to express all that hatred that's in your heart.
Yeah, he did. And he didn't, and when he did that, he made it okay for the whole world, because there were so many movements that just, were fueled by his rhetoric.
Emboldened, encouraged, and
Yes. Yes, it was.
they're a wave of their own.
And so when you look at this, I mean, this woman, she went into a bathroom in McDonald's, and then these attackers attacked and videotaped it as she was attacked and killed because she went to just use the bathroom. That's why you need to have rights, protection, these bathrooms. This is a serious thing, a bathroom, because some people think it's appalling, you know, that anybody, an LGBT person would be using their bathroom. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the following month, Yampi Mendez Arroco, a 19-year-old transgender man, died in Mocha after being shot twice in the face and twice in the back. Mendez had reportedly been assaulted by a woman just hours before the shooting. So this was a man, 14-year-old man, being assaulted by a woman, shot in the face twice and in the back. The body of a nursing school student, Michelle Ramos Vargas, was found late September near a farm in San German in the Southwest. Vargas had been repeatedly shot in the head and left on an island, an isolated road.
Why the laws are supposed to protect the vulnerable.
Yep. So, I mean, when you look over here and you see this rights and, when you look at government statistical things, you say, okay, that's kind of cool. But then you look at reality in real life, something's not right. There's a disconnect.
There's a lot of corruption in the police force and law enforcement and government.
Yes.
So it's kind of,
Just like it was in Belize. Belize was like that too.
yeah, it's kind of lawless for lack of a better word.
Yeah, that's sad. Okay, religion in Puerto Rico. The majority of Puerto Ricans are Roman Catholic, but religious freedom for all faiths is guaranteed by the Commonwealth Constitution. There is a Jewish community center in Miramar and a Jewish Reformed congregation in Santurce. There are Protestant services for Baptists, Episcopalians, Lutherans, and Presbyterians, and there are other interdenominational services. Although it is predominantly Catholic, Puerto Rico does not allow Catholic dogma and rituals as assiduously as do the churches of Spain and Italy. Because the church supported slavery, there was a long-lasting resentment against the all-Spanish clergy of colonial days. Island-born men were excluded from the priesthood. When Puerto Ricans eventually took over the Catholic churches on the island, they followed some guidelines for Spain and Italy, but modified or ignored others. Following the US acquisition of the island in 1898, Protestants grew in influence and popularity. There were Protestants on the island before the invasion, but their numbers increased after Puerto Rico became a US colony. Many islanders liked the idea of separation of church and state, as provided for the US Constitution. In recent years, Pentecostal fundamentalism has swept across the island. There are some 1,500 evangelical churches in Puerto Rico today.
Ugh.
That's a lot of churches.
No kidding.
So anyway, so that's Puerto Rico. Okay, this is just broke my heart. Oh gosh. Okay, anyway. Puerto Rico's new tipping point. Horrific femicides reignite fight against gender violence. The killing of Keisha,
Rodriguez.
which is her, Keisha Rodriguez and Andrea Ruiz have spurred intensified protests to hold accountable a system that failed to protect women, many of whom have sought help. This is May of 2021. Andrea Ruiz did what she could to protect herself from an ex-boyfriend who was constantly following her, harassing and even threatening to publish intimate photos of her on social media. The terrified 35-year-old woman appeared in court virtually a month and a half ago to file a complaint against Miguel Ocasio, 40, under Puerto Rico's domestic violence intervention and prevention law. Ruiz pleaded for Ocasio's arrest after she was unable to get the court to issue a protective order against the man whom she had dated for 8 months. In a leaked audio of the court appearance, she can be heard describing the pattern of emotional abuse and persecution she endured at his hands before and after they were dating. But the judge said she found no cause to arrest Ocasio, who 1 month later would go on to kill Ruiz. Her burned body was found on the island on the side of a road in the town of Calle on April 28, so disfigured that Puerto Rico's Institute of Forensic Science had to use dental records for identification. The agency determined her death was a homicide. Ocasio confessed to the crime shortly after the body was found. Police said he mortally assaulted Ruiz by using physical force and a knife. Ocasio remains in prison on charges of first-degree murder and destruction of evidence, among others. The body of Keisha Rodriguez, 27, was found floating on the San Juan Lagoon near Teodoro Bridge in San Juan 2 days after her family reported her missing on April 29th. According to a criminal complaint, Rodriguez was killed after she told Puerto Rican boxer Felix Verdejo, whom she had known for most of her life, that she was pregnant with his child based on a pregnancy test. Authorities alleged that Verdejo punched her and injected her with a syringe filled with substances purchased from a drug point. He and an accomplice then tied her up with wire and bound her to a cinder block, later throwing her over a bridge into the water. According to the complaint, Verdejo then shot at Rodriguez with a pistol from the bridge above, the complaint said. So this is just, it's just horrifying.
Talk about problem solving. That's just amazing that that's how you solve your problems.
This is his girlfriend and she's pregnant. And I just can't believe it.
She knew him all her life?
All her life, she knew him. There's this thing called machoism. But it's a machoism in Puerto Rico amongst the men.
Machismo.
Yeah, machismo. And it's a big problem for women. They're very machoistic, machismo, that thing. Yeah, it's bad. Do you want to read that?
Okay, the only place in America where women earn more than men, Puerto Rico. Okay. You read that right. Puerto Rico is the one part of the United States where women have higher median salaries than men. This is in part due to their level of education. In Puerto Rico, 29% of women aged 25 or older had at least a bachelor's degree, compared to only 20% of Puerto Rican men. Women make less than men in every US state and almost every part of the world. In the US, this has been attributed to factors like career choices and the demands of motherhood. However, in Puerto Rico, the wage gap is ever so slightly flipped. According to the US Census Bureau, the median salary for women in Puerto Rico was $24,486 in 2016, the most recent for which such data is available. The median salary for men was $23,711. This amounts to about a 3% difference in pay. For comparison, American women, when taken as a whole, made an average of 76% of what men made in 2016, according to census data. So what's responsible for the small yet statistically significant difference. A study conducted by researchers at the University of Puerto Rico found that Puerto Rican women are an average more educated than men, 11.9 years of education versus 11.2 years for men. In the US in general, the two sexes are almost equally educated, with women edging out men by 0.01 years.
Yeah, and then this shows some of the states in the dark is 80% women make 80, a percentage of 80% more. So they do pretty well in California, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, New York, North Carolina, and Florida, and Puerto Rico, little Puerto Rico.
Pink.
Mhm. Glimmer of hope there. Puerto Rico declares state of emergency over gender violence issues. Now, because this is such a big deal, I had to put some of these articles in there because it's such a big deal. So you might, it might be a little bit of a repeat of what's going on, but it's because it's such a big deal. The Puerto Rican government responded this weekend to the plea of thousands who have asked the island's leaders to address the ongoing crisis of gender violence, January 25th, 2021. Newly sworn in Governor Pedro Pierluisi signed an executive order Sunday declaring a state of emergency that would allocate resources to deal with gender violence in Puerto Rico. Gender violence is a social evil based on ignorance and attitudes that cannot have space or tolerance in the Puerto Rico that we aspire to. Pierluisi said in a news release, for too long, vulnerable victims have suffered the consequences of systematic machismo, there we go, inequity, discrimination, lack of education, lack of guidance, and above all, lack of action. It is my duty and my commitment as governor to establish a stop to gender violence. And for these purposes, I have declared a state of emergency. The rate of gender violence in general is still rising. Last year, a total of 60 indirect and direct murders linked to gender violence were reported in the island, according to Puerto Rico's Gender Equality Observation, a figure that represents an increase of 62% from 2019. As part of the executive order, a mobile app will be created to assist victims and report aggressions, a program to check in with women who have filed restraining orders, and educational media campaigns will also be launched. So this is a really, really big deal. Women are being really violently abused in Puerto Rico. Now there's this video. I don't want to start it because I don't know how long that we're going to do. So if we have some time, maybe I'll play it toward the end. Okay. Sexual exploitation, trafficking, and domestic slavery. Puerto Rico is a destination for sex tourism and a transit point for women and children from other Caribbean islands and from the interior of the islands for the purpose of sexual exploitation. Cases have also been reported as foreigners, both men and women, who cross the ocean and are used for labor exploitations. Besides the crossing of borders, trafficking and domestic slavery of Puerto Rican children seem to be the most evident occurrence on the island. Some of the activities for which minors are used are the distribution and sale of drugs, work as mules, prostitution and pornography, and other illegal activities. Often the exploiter is a family member, a member of a foster family in a foster home, and or a neighbor, particularly when the case includes prostitution and other sexual activities. Although precise statistics on human trafficking in Puerto Rico do not exist, the significant number of children living in foster homes or foster care, the high number of families living in poverty, and the island's immigration levels, together with gender discrimination, suggest that there may be a serious human trafficking problem in Puerto Rico. So there is a big sex trade here. And Dominican Republic too. The two of them, really big sex trade. Okay, political corruption in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's governor and other top officials on Monday became the formal targets of an in-depth government investigation into recent corruption allegations, July 2020. The U.S. territory's Special Investigating Prosecutor Panel agreed to probe the allegations against Governor Wanda Vasquez and others following a referral from the island's Department of Justice that ended with 2 justice secretaries stepping down earliest this month and led to calls for impeachment against the governor. The frustration comes after a government warehouse full of supplies was found on Saturday near the southern town of Ponce, close to the epicenter of a series of earthquakes. Much of the aid, including bottled water, baby food, had been sitting around since the disastrous 2017 hurricane season and had expired. But there were also cots, generators, batteries, and emergency radios. The panel will also investigate 4 other government officials, including 1 senator and chief of staff, Antonio Luis Pabon. This government is covered up in corruption, said a protester as he stood outside the Capitol building. Corruption is what has made Puerto Rico economically and morally bankrupt. So you're right, Francisco. There's a lot of corruption, especially political corruption. If they could just, if they didn't have that political corruption, they could actually have a chance in their country. But the politicians at the highest levels, I mean, there's this aid that could have been given to people in great need, and they just went expired.
If it's sitting there.
Yep.
I knew quite a few Puerto Rican people, and they all say the same thing. There's so much poverty over there.
Yep.
And there's so much drugs and corruption. That's why most of them are over here.
Yeah, come to America. Yep. Puerto Rico sees more pain and little progress 3 years after Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Maria devastated the U.S. territory on September 20, 2017, ultimately killing at least 2,975 people. That's a lot of people. It was the deadliest U.S.-based natural disaster in 100 years. And Trump didn't do a thing? Oh,
Not much of nothing.
over 200,000 Puerto Ricans left for the mainland, many temporarily and some permanently. Island residents had no full power for almost a year. The health system was overwhelmed, and an understaffed forensic science department couldn't keep up with the bodies piling up. 3 years later, there's frustration that crises have only compounded. There have been a series of destructive earthquakes, and more recently, the coronavirus pandemic. Oh, on top of that. While the Trump administration and island officials haven't made any real progress updating the island's antiquated electrical grid and rebuilding destroyed houses. Hurricane Maria resulted in about $90 billion in damage, making it the 3rd costliest hurricane in United States history. In December, Puerto Rico was hit by a sequence of seismic events that triggered multiple strong earthquakes that brought down hundreds of homes and schools in January. Well over 9,800 tremors have been registered on the island since then. There's climate change in here. Biden administration lifts Trump-era restrictions stalling Puerto Rico's hurricane aid April 20, 2021. The Department of Housing and Urban Development also made $8.2 billion available to Puerto Rico 3 years after Congress initially approved the aid. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development removed restrictions unique to Puerto Rico that has been limiting the island's ability to access certain recovery funds following the devastating aftermath of Hurricane Maria in 2017, the agency announced. Over the same time period, President Donald Trump has doubled down several times in previous comments opposing disaster funding for Puerto Rico while disputing the hurricane's death toll and failing to acknowledge such deaths. I mean, are we even surprised at that?
No.
Under Trump, HUD had previously approved a total of $20 billion for the island's reconstruction, a historic amount, but the agency stalled the release of the aid in 2019 and imposed additional restrictions and requirements last year on how Puerto Rico could gain access to the funds, citing corruption and financial mismanagement concerns. Biden eliminated restrictions requiring incremental grant obligations, a federal financial monitor to supervise the aid, and additional oversight from the island's federally imposed Financial Oversight Board. So I thought this was important to understand. This is a big part of Puerto Rican history, and they're still suffering, a lot of suffering in Puerto Rico. And then we have the COVID-19. Huh. Did you want to read that?
Okay, let me get my eyeballs adjusted here. COVID-19. Puerto Rico enacted strict COVID-19 measures. It paid off, and it's a lesson for the mainland. March 15, 2021. Puerto Rico used curfews and rigorous sanitary measures, and the pandemic was never politicized. A health expert said it saved lives and also its health care system.
See what happens when you don't politicize it? People's lives are saved.
And you don't go conspiracy theory happy. I'm not wearing masks, and it's not really a disaster. Yeah. A year into the pandemic, fears of COVID-19 had not come true. Puerto Ricans in the U.S. territory avoided overwhelming their already fragile health care system during the pandemic, mainly because of extraordinary measures the local government put in place early on, and people's willingness to comply with them.
Good.
In Puerto Rico, the pandemic was never politicized, said Daniel Colon Ramos, professor of the cellular neuroscience at Yale University and president of Puerto Rico's scientific coalition. People were really rowing in the same direction.
They were in one mindset.
Since the start of the pandemic, at least 94,336 COVID-19 cases have been confirmed in Puerto Rico, an island of 3.2 million. The virus has killed at least 2,073 people in the island so far. In a drastic effort to limit crowds, Puerto Rico was among the first U.S. jurisdictions to implement an island-wide curfew last March that asked people not to leave their homes after midnight. Nighttime, I'm sorry. Nighttime. Non-essential businesses were shut down. All schools closed down, and cruise ships were banned from docking on the island. Throughout most of last year, the government would send an alert to every person's phone to remind them the curfew was coming up. Some people were critical of it, but if it was not done like that, things would have been much worse. Many criticized the efforts, saying that it was very hasty, but they helped control the pandemic a lot.
So they actually did pretty good. You know, when you go, because of coming out of Maria in 2017, and they just, you know, sometimes when you just get so bombasted with all these different, like, you know, terrible things, you're on guard, and you're, you know, that's happened to South Korea and some of the other Asian countries when they had their SARS one and all that stuff. They were more prepared.
And here these silly Americans, I got my constitutional rights. I'm not wearing a mask, and fighting on airlines, fighting on buses. Just a big, oh, the airlines got so many people that they had to throw off, they lost count now.
I know. Okay, and that's it.
The video.
Okay, yeah, I guess I have a little bit more time to show this video. This video, is everybody still awake? Did people fall asleep here?
Oh yeah, let's keep going.
No, play the video.
We're all good. We're good.
This video is a really good one. It is
Elaine?
15 minutes, but this is it. So I really, why am I not able to?
I was muted, sorry.
Let Elaine pause the video.
Oh, yeah, okay.